Now we're going to have a reading by Jason Schossler, who also is a finalist for the Paterson Poetry Prize, and he is the 2010 winner of the Melissa Leonidas Gregory Poetry Prize, a two-time Pushcart Prize nominee, the recipient of the 2009 Edwin Markham Prize in Poetry, and the 2010 Emerging Writer Award from Grist, the Journal for Writers. Jason teaches writing at Temple University, and you'll have to say that, you're whatever the hell it is. Take that out, John. And also works as a freelance legal journalist for Thomas Reuters. Jason lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm wondering if you also are an attorney.
I am not an attorney.
Well, Martin is, sometimes you need one, right. I think that it will be, if you don't know Jason Schossler's work, this will be a great introduction to his work for you, and he will be our last reader, and then we'll break for an open reading. Let's welcome Jason Schossler.
Hey, this is kind of fun. You know, my publisher, Kim Wyatt at Bona Fide Books, has a bit of a sense of humor, and when she called to let me know that I was a runner-up for the Paterson Poetry Prize, I'm like, that's great, but what do you really want? And when she told me that Martina Spada and Dorian Lux were among the other winners of the prize, I said, okay, now this joke is just getting mean, all right? But here I am, amazed to be with them, and I've thoroughly enjoyed your reading, and I'm humbled to be in your presence. Thank you so much. It was at Ursinus College that you were. Ursinus College in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, yes. J.D. Salinger, I attended there at least briefly, but yes. Yeah. So speaking of writers that I'm really humbled by, John Steinbeck is one of my favorite writers ever, and one of the big reasons why I think I really want to start writing seriously. I really got interested in him late in high school and in early college, and read everything that he wrote essays on him in college, and even took a trip out to go to Monterey and Cannery Row and rewalk in his steps, and a tremendous influence on me in many ways. So it was really, really a tremendous experience for me to read the book Travels with Charlie when I came to this passage, and I'll read it to you, and it's going to sound very mundane to you, but it meant a lot to me. Steinbeck writes, I drove the wide, eventless way called US 90, which bypassed Buffalo and Erie to Madison, Ohio, and then found the equally wide and fast US 20 past Cleveland and Toledo, and so into Michigan. To you, he sounds like he's just, giving you directions on a Google Maps, right? But to me, this means he drove right through my hometown. And not only that, but he drove right by my grandfather's house. So I was elated, thrilled to know part of Travels with Charlie went through Ashtabula County in northeastern Ohio. And then a few minutes later, I got really saddened. Like, he didn't mention a thing. He just mentioned the road, not a landmark, not a bridge, not a store or a diner. So I was asking, was my town really that bad? In the early 1960s? Yes. Yeah. So you've been there. So I think it was a strange mix of bliss and disappointment that really led me to write this first poem that I'm going to read here from my book Mud Cakes. And it's titled simply, Steinbeck's Route. Think of him in hunting coat and naval cap as he bucketed into Ashtabula County, lightly crusted with the dirt of travel, the overloaded springs of his camper sighing under the weight of double bed and 4-burner stove, in front of Dunk's home diner, where my grandfather, fresh off his shift on the docks, forked in butterscotch pie and mulled over the Cleveland Browns' chances against Pittsburgh on Sunday. Or going over the railroad tracks near City Hall, the ceilings twice lowered to help save on heating costs, and then lumbering past the snow-beaten houses behind St. Joe's, some of them crushed and deserted, driven to earth by winter. Depending on when he came through that September, he might have heard the steam trumpet of the Pacific Express rolling into the West Yard, or the gears of the Bascule lift bridge grinding above schooner and sloop. Crossing the Black River into the tall oaks, perhaps he tipped his cap to children playing Ring Olivio, or sifted through a can of lures in the country store as his poodle worked a biscuit on the porch. He wrote nothing of our town, neither of the lake-polished driftwood along the beach, nor the oily waves that sloshed against the piers. But I like to think that the dollop of old granddad he shared with a stranger in Michigan had come from Cook's Drug on the corner of Prospect and Maine, or that by the time he rumbled across the county line and continued west, it wasn't for lack of friendly face or pleasant meadow to camp and cook a plate of salted pork, but simply because the road away from here seemed broad and straight and sweet. There's several reoccurring themes in Mud Cakes, and one of them does deal with the theme of divorce. My parents fought a lot when I was a kid. My father moved out of the house by the time I was about 10 years old. And there was a lot of drama in those years, as anybody, child of divorce would know. And something I continually have come back to again and again in my work. I think it really comes out of, this deep need to make sense of your upbringing, re-examine from the point of view of an adult, and really understand its long-term effects and consequences of the things you experience and witness between your parents when things aren't going so well. So I'd like to share a couple of those poems tonight from the book. The first will focus really on the days of my father thinking about moving out. And then I'll move right on to a second poem that really focuses on my mother still trying to come to terms with the big shift in our house about a year later. The first one is called Inspiration. That June, my father's unfinished drawings stood out on scratch paper and the backs of grocery lists. The ghostly form of a latex walrus, half copied from the cover of Magical Mystery Tour, or the frame of my toy Trans Am Bandit, rear bumper and wheels missing, and across the hood, 4 careless and tired lines that look more like a giant W than a screaming eagle. I remembered Saturday nights in front of Love Boat, when perfection casts a spell over the family room. My father making flipbook cartoons in the margins of old paperbacks, or one of us itchy on the sofa as he slowly took in profile and shadow, penciling first an eye, then a cheek, shyly a face, softening the edges with his fingertips, and him hugging the portrait against his chest, saying, "No, no," when we leaned in for a sneak peek. And never once a line half-hearted or simply abandoned, until that June when he couldn't sit still, sinking into lazy boy with a coffee cup and paper, his eye an album art or yellowed photograph, only to get up minutes later for whiskey or cigarette while the rest of us sat around the television, my mother watching and not watching, her mouth a thin white cut as he moved like a drift of absence through the half-light of family room and hall, searching for new subject or model. As he was the night, I decided to finish one for him, adding hubcaps and handlebars to a red Kawasaki forged from a catalog, my hand unpracticed but cautious, outlining in ink and shading with dull-tipped Crayola, careful to blend my touch with his. He smiled and messed my hair when I showed it to him in the kitchen, told me it was my picture now, and pinned it to the refrigerator under a pineapple magnet. Then he wandered out the door and up the driveway, cigarette smoke leaking through his teeth, as he turned on the tender grass between sidewalk and street, his steps at first slow and then quickening, as though taken by a new line that was forming in his head, and one I wasn't so sure I wanted to complete. And the second one I'll read from you, focusing on my mother, is called Happy Hour, which never comes soon enough, does it? One night, when she said I needed a break from Fritos and the Outsiders, she took me along to Pirate's Alley, set me up with a pitcher of root beer, quarters for Centipede, and touched up her face, her hand unsteady. She said, "We deserve this. We both deserve this." And I cringed as she rustled out to the dance floor in the rich parade of her hair and perfume. In those days, she lived by her will, determined to stay upright. Amid the clouds of smoke and beery air, she carried on with her new crowd, women with durable faces who had taken it and could still take it, butts twitching under a wheel of neon, spider veins aglow. All step, turn, tilt, clap, middle-aged and hell-bent on not letting hope lose its grip. In the lull between songs, she threw down scotch and water, let her cigarette smoke out in spurts. She said, "If your father can live high on the hog, so can we." And I bit my lip and nodded along, kept nodding as something came into her face and went away again. She then said it once more and trained her eyes on the bandstand, as if forcing herself to see what she was seeing. The two of us waiting for the music to go back up, drowning out that other sound. Are there any Star Wars fans in the room today? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. The rest of you have heard of Star Wars, right? Of course. I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan, I'll admit that. It was the first movie I saw in the theater when I was 5 years old, and I'm actually feeling very troubled the last couple of weeks with Disney having acquired the rights to Lucas's legacy. I see that they laid off about 150,000 workers from his video game division the other day. So I'm very, very wary of when the new films come out. I have fears that maybe Donald Duck is going to be cast as a Jedi Knight or something, or Goofy as Chewbacca. I don't know. I'm just very suspicious of Disney. And but as you can see, it's always been a passion in my life, almost verging on something, a religious experience with me. And it's one that I really I got more of a spiritual message out of, I think, more so than a collection of toys and merchandising. That's kind of where I came from as a kid with it, because I was really drawn to the bigger themes. And so Star Wars plays the theme through several of the poems in my book. I touch on it in various different ways, some poems focusing on it directly, others just maybe an allusion here and there. So the poem I'm going to read to you tonight kind of focuses on more of the spiritual side of what I found in Star Wars. And it also kind of focuses on the rich kids in the neighborhood who had all the great toys when I did not. So I never, hesitant to take a shot at people who have more money than me, because it seems like most people do. I'll admit I'm incredibly jealous growing up of the kids that had the bigger toys, the nicer bikes, of course. But also, I think I realized maybe at a younger age, or at least it's the poet looking back, that these material goods were really more at odds with what I think is the anti-technological meaning behind the films. So the poem I'll read for you tonight this afternoon, is called simply Being Luke. On the playground, it always came down to the same thing. Doug had the toy lightsaber, and I didn't. Never mind his house, that destroyer of worlds, solid brick and custom built on a patch of woods where my mother used to pick blackberries. Or his room, always the latest gadget beeping and blinking on 4 AA's. His folks never working a garage sale the way Uncle Owen haggled the Jawas for a pair of old droids. Then there was that week in July, his whole family gone and then back again, jet-lagged and fat on elephant ears and Space Mountain. Luke was a dreamer, a farm boy who didn't know such things. And when he climbed up that cliff on his desert planet and gazed at the twin suns of Tatooine, music swelling, I understood exactly what he felt. Me, a boy whose family left Ashtabula just once, and even then, only an hour east of Pennsylvania to save money on sales tax for school clothes. And when the fan belt snapped in the duster on our way home from the mall that afternoon, heat slamming into us like a wall of hot, wet cotton, it was neither map nor targeting computer that led us to a payphone, but my trust in the Force, that energy field that bound the galaxy together, and one that didn't require a set of batteries to run. Pop culture does play a prevalent role in mud cakes, just not Star Wars. Lois and Clark show up, the rock group Kiss, Love Boat. If it was in the 70s or 80s, it's in there. It's like ragu, right? All the ingredients are there from that era. So the last poem I'd like to share with you today is a piece that was inspired by a strange little day that happened when TV came to me, or really more accurately came to my neighborhood that I grew up in when I was about 11 in northeastern Ohio. It's based on a real event, as I said, when I was a kid, and it wasn't until really years later that I think I really saw behind it. It really, I think, represents the way pop culture and our love of the concept of celebrity has sort of replaced some of our older mythologies. And so I really like to thank you for joining us today, and I will conclude with this poem that I titled New Religion. The morning the camera crew from the 700 Club showed up across the street, we waited in the window for nearly an hour before Dr. Belknap walked outside in the white sweatsuit and sneakers he'd worn the day Jesus opened his arms to him under Mr. Schwenk's sycamore tree. By then, we all knew the story of his epiphany and would hear it again on TV 3 weeks later when Jim and Tammy Faye, mascara pouring down her cheeks, narrated a slow-motion reenactment of how he'd been hitting the bottle pretty hard in those days and had been only hours away from leaving his fat wife for his dental hygienist when, bags packed, an apartment rented, he went out for this morning jog and returned born again. We first learned of his run-in with Christ a few weeks after it happened, when he knocked on our door to spread the good word. His eyes shone like glass bottles out of the sea. His lips were moist, and he swallowed often to clear his throat of emotion. "He's nuttier than a fruitcake," my mother said, after she feigned a stomachache to finally get rid of him. And all the kids in the block were pretty sure his sons were too. After he pulled them out of McKinsey Elementary a month later for Grace Christian Academy, where they were taught, and quick to believe, that George Lucas was a false prophet, and Stevie Nicks sacrificed white cats in her dressing room after Fleetwood Mac concerts. Saturday afternoons, we stopped asking them to play ball with us, except when the teams were uneven. And even then, we kept our distance, sticking them out in right field as if they knew something was missing, sticking them out in right field where we couldn't feel their eyes on us between pitches, as if they knew something was missing in our lives and were itchier than hell to tell us exactly what it was. But Jim and Tammy Faye were all ears. And as we watched the makeup girl powder Dr. Belknap's face on the morning of the shoot, as if he were Sly Stallone about to run through the Italian market, we quickly saw the error of our ways. Tell Kevin you're sorry for calling him a pussy so that we can get into the shot, Teddy Perry elbowed me when we joined the others on the sidewalk. They'll need extras, won't they? And our neighbors, we saw the same ferocious smiles of anticipation. Jozo Simrak checked her wig in a compact mirror. Denny Kelleher had a new pair of trousers. And when the time came for the first take, The entire street fell silent, except for the sound of my mother sweeping cigarette butts from the front porch, just in case our house made it into the final cut. Down past the Schwenk house, the dentist's wife and kids bowed their heads in prayer with the film crew, their eyes filled with joyous light. Then they stepped aside as the star of the hour took off behind the open camera van, a bearded man in a ball cap barking directions for him to slow down, speed up, cry more, smile less, as his feet smacked the pavement. He had the part down. From the edge of the set, we could see how well it would play on TV. The old man clawing at the air with his fat hands as he neared the now hollowed sycamore. His pace quickened, his cheeks reddened, and by the time he finally reached the spotlighted tree, he had us. Joan of Arc at the stake, Moses parting the Red Sea, the whole of Amelie Avenue caught up in the mystery of the sycamore's branches, suddenly believing. Thank you so much. You know, it's hard to really think about where you first aspired to write, what inspired you. But I think it probably happened when I was 5 years old, and when I went to see Star Wars for the first time, was plays such a prevalent role in my work. And you know, I was 5 years old, and the Star Destroyer goes overhead, and it made me want to dream bigger. It really made me feel like I was in contact with something a lot larger than myself that I've already experienced in 5 years. So it made me want to chase the idea of narrative and story and something outside of myself. So it really started there. And then over time, I would tell stories on my grandfather's lap, and he would encourage me to tell stories. And even over time, as we ran into some family difficulties, my mother and father going through divorce and everything, I think the foundation of me then taking me to Star Wars, my grandfather and their encouragement when I'd make up stories, I think that you kind of get the idea you want to continue to seek that kind of positive affirmation, and you want to continue to just develop and keep, I don't know, entertaining people to a degree, but also kind of finding what you want to say in it. So it really started when I was about 5 years old. And it's, I think the thing I'm most grateful for, despite some hard times when I was, growing up, is that I at least always had this other side of my parents that were really, really supportive and really pushed me to be the best storyteller person I could be, and really had a tremendous emphasis on the importance of art. And to have that at such a young age, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think is a real blessing. And that's kind of like, that's, you choose to focus on that. You work through the hard things, and you keep digging, you keep trying to get stronger, and through that you find some kind of closure on the more difficult parts of your childhood as well, I think.